Entrepreneur Bootcamp Session 2, and welcome to all of our drone enthusiasts joining us from all over South Africa and from all over the world. The Drone Tech Innovation Showcase is a series of events brought to you by the Saldanha Bay Innovation Campus, an initiative of the Saldanha Bay Industrial Development Zone. And these events included drone tech talks, which were recorded sessions, and they're available on YouTube, an entrepreneur bootcamp, which you're attending, and a drone tech innovation challenge. These all lead up to the Innovation Day on the 1st of October. And for more information on all of that, please follow Saldanha Bay Industrial Development Zone on LinkedIn. Our entrepreneurial bootcamp is dedicated to all entrepreneurs and inspiring entrepreneurs. We've gathered industry experts to share their knowledge with you, so you don't have to figure this out on your own. And today we've had one session, which was earlier on, and you are now in session 2. The first one focused on founder journeys, and this session 2 will now focus on the skills and tools needed to start and scale your business and the principles of design thinking. So I've been asked to let you know a few housekeeping points before we start. I think there was a slide on this, but just to let you know that all the mics have been muted for the duration of the session. If you have any questions, there's a Q&A box, and once the session is over, we will then read out those questions to the specific speakers, but you can also raise your hand and ask the question to the speaker directly. And in the previous session, we had quite a lot of interaction, so please feel free to do that. And we will alternate the questions from the Q&A as well as raised hands. And now I have the pleasure of introducing our first speaker, Jamie Allen, who's the CEO of Allen Panthera, for his talk on how to start and grow a business. Jamie, over to you.
Hi, Kim. How are you?
Good. Very good to see you.
You too. You too. Yeah, I mean, I was led to believe this was a sort of discussion. I don't have a presentation in hand to go into, so it would be more beneficial, I think, if there's some kind of questions rather than sort of me having a long-term monologue. So if that's okay, we can dive into some discussion.
Yeah, well, let's do that. So the topic at hand is how to start and grow a business, which is, of course, the million-dollar question, right? How do you start? And I think in our previous session, there were some helpful points that were presented too. So from your view, where would someone who is at the start of their entrepreneurial journey, or even just thinking about whether this is for them, who are here today and who are going to be watching this back at some point, what would you say is the starting point? How do you even, what's day one?
Day one. I mean, it's a Pandora's box, isn't it? There's so many aspects to, first of all, the idea that you have and what you want to achieve, and I think that's a good point, is having that belief. First of all, don't just discount that someone else has thought of it or someone else is doing it. It's quite likely that your idea is unique, or at least it can be disruptive or competitive. You've maybe thought of a different way of doing it. But once you go from that stage, it's really making sure that what you want to either sell as a product or a service is actually going to be what the market that you're going into needs. A lot of people will design things, create things based on what they think their customers or their market wants, without actually checking that that's what the market and the customers need. And that's where a lot of startups fail, is that they launch these products and services without actually doing research, speaking to the customers, holding focus groups, doing surveys, doing minimal viable products and minimal marketable products, to then make sure that before they launch it commercially and go through the whole commercialization process, that it is actually going to be what the market needs, and there's a gap there. So I'd say that is probably one of the biggest things to do beforehand, is you've got the idea, and great, but then test it out, and take your time doing that to make sure that you spend as little money as possible and as little time as possible before you have that validation that it is going to be worthwhile continuing to the next stage, which obviously then goes into financing and investment and the full sort of roadmap of what you need specific to your product or service. So yeah, do your homework, basically, to summarize.
Yeah. In fact, as you were just saying that, a question came through, and Dwayne Kellerman, thank you for this question. It's literally really a segue into what Jamie was just saying. And Dwayne asks, how do you recognize whether or not an idea is investable and then scalable? And how do you identify which niche you should dive into based on your idea?
So every part of innovation, every part of being an entrepreneur is not difficult, but there's no textbook for it. There's no how-to guide and an easy way of doing it. Every single person and idea and journey is completely unique. So if you want to find out whether your idea is investable, you have to, first of all, do this little bit of market research, a little bit of testing with the potential customers that you think your product or solution would be useful for. But it all comes down to the investor as well, to be honest. Investors, again, they're all different, whether it's an angel investor who is maybe a private individual, high net worth individual with a lot of spare cash, but he might actually, or she might actually just like to have a bit of a gamble and a bit of a risk when they come to investing. They might want to be really hands-on and be really involved and support you through the journey if they have that particular expertise to your sector or to your personal circumstances. Maybe they've been through the same thing as you have in their earlier life, or they might be completely hands-off and they just want to give you the money and take the return at the end of it. Then you might have your venture capitalists, who are obviously a much more corporate beast with very sort of strict KPIs. And then you have your syndicates of angels and VCs and lots of other different types of investors. So again, part of when you get to that point is making sure that you have the right audience, the right investor, the ideal investor that you want for your product or solution, because you don't just want to take anyone and regret that, where they might have more control, they might be too meddling, they might be not supportive enough. So when you get to the point of seeking investment, that's when you really need to work out what type of investor you want to have. But that little bit of research, as I say, to begin with, to check that your idea is needed or it can be competitive or disruptive, that's where you'll know that it's going to be a solution to a problem. And because it is a solution to a problem, by that kind of nature, it is investable, it is needing the money to then be developed and commercialized. And in the second part of the question, Kim, just to remind me, what was the second
let's
part?
quickly see. And it says, how do you identify which niche you should dive into based on your idea?
Okay, yeah. So this is a very common challenge that entrepreneurs face, is they come up with something and they think they know where it's going to go, which sector, which market, or they don't know. So the best thing is to either, again, like I say, do some market research, but certainly in the UK, we have sort of regional enterprise and innovation bodies that are sort of government supported or government set up. They'll be very, very helpful to give you a first pass and a sort of a screening analysis of your idea. And again, it's about making sure that it fits into the right market, because again, you can't just go ahead and put it where you think it will go. You need to have that validation from the customers and the investors, that it is fitting in the right area, as you say. So it's almost trying to flip the mindset of you doing and putting your idea out there, but letting the sort of the recipient and the market and the customer do the talking and let them guide you, as long as you're able to be flexible. And I've seen that before, where a Canadian company I was working with had a GPS denied tracking technology, and they thought it would be used for drones, funnily enough, in underground mines. But it turned out, through some discussions with investors and through some other analysis with universities, that actually it could be used in the medical and high level performance sport sectors, and they abandoned the drone mining idea to go into the medical side for this product. So it just shows you that if there's legs in your idea, it will likely go somewhere, but let the sort of the market and the experts guide you. Don't sort of go headstrong and put it somewhere, because again, if you put it in the wrong place, it will just fail, and then you'll be back to square one and probably have lost a lot of time and cash and reputation possibly as well.
Thanks, Jamie. Dwayne, let us know if that answered. I think Jamie did a great job of answering it, but let us know in the chat. Matteo, I see your question. We're going to get to that in a second. I'm just going to acknowledge James. I see you have your hand up. Is it James this time? Palisha, can we unmute James? We have a hand.
Sorry about
Is that James?
Yeah, sorry about that. First by mistake.
Have you got a question, James?
Sorry about that. I pressed it by mistake.
Oh, okay, no problem. No worries. Okay, so let's go to Matteo, and so good to see you, and thanks for asking the questions. Matteo says, there are so many roles to fill when starting a business. Which roles are crucial to start a business, especially one in the drone industry?
Oh, good question again. So again, so much more to this than we have time for. But again, it's solidifying your idea, your business case in this specific aspect. So if you're going to start a business, you need to make sure that it obviously what you want to do business with is what is needed by your market, as we spoke about. But when you actually then want to start executing your business, you need to make sure that, first of all, the organization, whether that's just yourself or whether it's with employees or other partners, that it's actually structured, and all the sort of background paperwork, the sort of the typical day-to-day running type stuff, you need to make sure all of that is in place first of all, because if you sort of just start to go out and sell your wares, then things will come back to haunt you and bite you if you don't have these kind of basic systems and processes in place. So what I mean is, obviously, business bank account is something great to get started with. Your business case or your business plan. So actually just thinking, okay, what do I want to do with this business, and where do I want to take it within 2, 3, 5 years? If you are able to take what's in your head and put it down on paper, and then go through the process of looking at, okay, where do I stand in the market, looking at my potential competitors, doing a little bit of a SWOT analysis on them, a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats analysis on them, just to see where you fit. That can then help you determine how you're going to compete, how you're going to sell. Do you go in with a lower price to try and have a sort of initial run of jobs, or do you have a very maybe a much more professional way of doing things? Maybe you have a specific sector compared to other competitors that they don't operate in, but whatever your USPs are, that's where you're going to really leverage and focus when you're doing your sort of you're selling. And then part of your business plan is going to look at these kind of sales strategies and your marketing strategy. So again, your sales strategy, is it going to be yourself maybe, doing LinkedIn or Facebook or social media to try and promote your brand? Do you have a business, page, a presence online? Is it easy for people on your website to contact you, to find you? Is it clear what your business is online? Do people go on and know exactly what you're offering them, what problem you're solving? Can they get in touch easily? And then how are you going to market that? So are you going to have someone else do a bit of, like I say, digital media, or are you going to start identifying events in the sector that you can go to, that you maybe want to network in, exhibit at, maybe do events like this where you're speaking about a topic of expertise? I'm totally just free flowing right now, but as I say, there's so many things. But the main thing is, like I say, consolidating all of this, slowing down, and taking a few days, if not a week, and putting all this into a business plan, so that when things start running away from you, hopefully as you start to get successful and have work coming in, that you can refer to this almost as a kind of refresher and a check to make sure that what you're doing is actually still in line with your plan. Now, obviously, your plan can be amended and upgraded. It can be adapted based on how you might find some challenges as you're out there in the market. But again, speaking to somebody else that has a business, again, these other resources, innovation campuses, government agencies who have a lot of free resources and a lot of expertise to help guide you with all these little steps that you need. People like myself and Kim, again, happy to give you those insights and support when we need. But the main thing again is belief, and not to give in too easily as well, because you're going to find bumps along the way. You're going to have challenges. You're going to have competitors, people that will take your work, steal your ideas, the way you're doing things. But again, if you're true to your values and in what you stand for and what your product or service offers to the market, that will shine through eventually. So if you're standing on, doing things properly and by the rules and with integrity, then that will come through to your customers more so than a cowboy who's just trying to find quick bucks with shoddy work. So that's kind of the whole business side. The drone side of setting up a drone business, again, we could be here all day, and it'd be great to talk about it all day. But again, it's making sure that first of all you're aware of what you need in terms of your permissions, to fly in your respective jurisdiction, what equipment you need and the cost of that, and not just to buy it or rent it, but obviously to insure it, what your contingency plan is if you only buy one drone and it maybe crashes. Do you have a spare to keep your business going, or how would that impact you? So part of your risk analysis for your business, as well as actually the jobs you're doing, is going to make sure that you fully assess these foreseen circumstances where things might just cause a bit of disruption, and you need to be prepared for that. But again, whichever sector you're operating in, or that you want to operate in the drone sector, look at the reputable companies. What are they doing? How are they doing it well? A lot of them will be very open to speak to you, because again, the drone world is quite open and friendly and collaborative. But they'll kind of, again, give you some really great pointers. But again, it's making sure that you don't necessarily limit yourself to one sector, because it might be too crowded, or it might not work out in terms of your level of capability or expertise, but that you can, if you're passionate enough, still go into other sectors. And there's, again, no harm in even joining a drone company as an employee, learning from them, working for them for a while, and then if you think you want to run your own business, then going to do that. So again, don't be afraid of, like I say, knockbacks, adversity. There's always a way to get where you want to be. It might just be a bit more of a zigzaggy line than a straight up and down line. But just believe in yourself. And the biggest thing I can say over the years that I've learned is networking. It has been something I wish I was told when I, left university, was the importance of connections, conversations, speaking to as many people as possible, building up that network, because you put a post on LinkedIn, someone likes it, shares it, comments on it, it travels the world, and suddenly you're building up connections and opportunities. And again, to tap into that is absolutely invaluable when you really need it the most too. So definitely, if you're not sort of doing that and putting yourself out there, you don't have to be, you know, immediately doing videos on LinkedIn and doing that sort of thing if you're a bit shy. But certainly just make connections, have little messages and comments, and just be involved, be sort of seen and visible. And again, you'll be part of this fantastically growing ecosystem, which will, as I say, reap dividends in the future.
Jamie, you touched on something right at the beginning, and I'm sure we've all been through it, but just to come back to Matteo's point around, you know, what roles, I think we could probably, as entrepreneurs or working on entrepreneurial environments, all say, you know, sometimes you have to do things that you aren't natural at, or that you aren't good at. And I guess, you know, people would say in entrepreneurial environments, you turn your hand to many things, right? And I think the thing, Matteo, also is to surround yourself with people who can do certain things for you that you are not good at, right? So ask for help. People help all the time. I think, especially with these days, having such accessible networks, to Jamie's point earlier on, ask for help, you know. So yeah, many roles to get a business started. And this leads to another question that's come through on the chat from Melanie. And the question for you, Jamie, is there a certain type of personality that one has to be an entrepreneur, and more so to start a business and take it to fruition? Good question.
Again, these are all great questions. It's self-belief. Again, I can't stress that enough. And the reason for that is you have so many successful entrepreneurs who are not the most outgoing and charismatic and not the most confident. They're very quiet, they're very studious, very sort of, you know, intellectual people, but they believe in what they've created in their idea, and they will see that through very silently and through a very committed sense of what they want to achieve. So, you know, there's no, again, personality type, but as long as you have the belief, because if you don't believe in what you're doing, first of all, then you won't have the drive to seek investment, to take it out to market, to ask for help, you know, all these things that we need to do. So that for me is if you don't believe in it, again, just speak to someone, just say, what do you think of this? Could you give me some tips? I'm thinking of this idea. And again, that feedback will let you see where you can improve things, what you're doing well, what you're not. That will generate, or it should generate, belief as well, because you'll be getting positives about, you know, your idea that you'll then think, actually, yeah, I can see the next step and where this will end up. So, you know, if you think of something, like I said right at the start, don't disregard it thinking, oh, someone else thought of it, or it's already being done somewhere. The chances are, you know, there might well be, but it's a big world and it's a big market. And certainly the drone space, there's not enough people doing everything for it to be crowded. You know, so yeah, believe in yourself, and again, just ask. As Kim said, that's a great point. I've always said, you know, what I was taught in school was there's no such thing as a stupid question. If you don't know something, you'll never learn if you don't ask. Even if you start just by Googling an answer to it, and then speaking to someone. But that, again, that's the thing, that the network, the support structure, there's so much out there to be part of, that you won't have any difficulty in finding, you know, people that will be on your side and want to help you.
100%. I would just add to that, Jamie, the risks that one has to take as an entrepreneur are plentiful, right? And some personality types are risk adverse. So that's just a watch out, you know, where you have some of these graphics where they say, you buy a day or a month or a year missed out on the best opportunity, but it's because you didn't continue no matter what. But it's that risk appetite that you kind of have to get used to, right? Or at least, if it's not natural, have people around you who encourage you through those times where you need to take risks as an entrepreneur. There's a whole human resources psychology thing to that. But
and it doesn't mean you don't have to take risks as in leave your job and sell your house and take out loans, and that can work for some people if they manage it well. But you could start with full time committed on working on this idea, and then it gets to the point where the funds, the savings that you've had, the loans, maybe it runs out, so you have to take a job again. But again, it's that don't give up. Do it in your spare time. Treat it as a hobby. Eventually, you'll get there. And that's where again it's just believing in and seeing that through and not giving up. But yeah, absolutely, the risk element of you will have to take risks, and some will appear greater to some than others. They're different for everyone. But again, you're not the first in the world to go through it as well. Everyone who's an entrepreneur has went through risk, and again, that's the benefit of speaking and learning from people that have went through these processes, is to find out how they manage them, how it affected them, and what they would pass on as advice. But as I say, it's well worth the reward to see it through. So yeah, don't give up.
Yeah, that's a big one. Don't give up, right? We had another question, Jamie, from Matteo. How many sectors can one enter initially when starting in the drone industry?
Oh, so that depends on what you. So if you're doing something like, for example, visual inspection, then that could be dozens of sectors. It could be wind turbine blades, buildings, bridges, boats, oil and gas platforms. Could be anything for a visual camera doing inspection or just image collection, basically. If you're wanting to do something really different, like search and rescue, or something that's a little bit more niche, then yeah, your options are limited. So again, it might come down to, okay, I love drones, I want to get involved in drones, but I don't know where to start. So then it's a case of maybe thinking, well, what sectors or what companies do I already sort of admire in my daily life that I can see a synergy with, that you can then look at operating in. Or it could be, again, speaking to your network and developing those relationships where you might find some friends, people that say, look, I've actually got this job I need some help with. You go and maybe just be a visual observer, not necessarily a pilot, and you actually like the sector that they're doing, or you might think, actually, this is boring, I don't like this one. So really it's down to your interest, but also then if you've already bought a drone, or if you haven't bought a drone, it's seeing if that piece of equipment suits the needs of that industry. So you're not going to do an offshore oil and gas inspection with a DJI Phantom. You're needing something much more complex and therefore costly. So again, it's that awareness of again, as I mentioned earlier, just thinking really slowly and diligently about what you want to do. And again, it could be, do you want to be a pilot, or do you want to be a visual observer, or even just do you want to be business development in the drone industry, or do you want to be a sort of a logistics planner? So you're not actually sort of at the coal face. But again, feel free to reach out to people like myself and Kim, I'm sure, with these types of questions, because we can point you in the right direction. But again, with the drone industry, as I'm sure you're all aware, the world is the oyster. So again, it's if you have a particular passion or a particular sector that appeals to you, focus on that. And again, if it doesn't work out, there's plenty of others. As long as you like drones, then yeah, there's limitless possibilities. So, I mean, I was even a few months ago part of an innovation program where we we were counting deer with drones, and that was because, you know, the Scottish government, you know, they by law have to know how many deer are in the country, and they're using artificial intelligence and machine learning with a complex beyond visual line of sight drone to replace a helicopter service which is in existence at the moment, to then go and count the deer on estates. So again, if you look at different parts of the world, you have, you know, caribou and you know, large wild game in North America. You, I'm sure, have lots of big game and much better wildlife than we have in Scotland over in Africa. You've got sheep in, you know, New Zealand and Australia. You've lots of reindeer across Scandinavia, and that's just from counting animals. And if you remember as well, there was those mirrored obelisks, sorry, those big towers that were appearing in the parts of the world in America and the desert. One of those was found by a helicopter out counting mountain goats. So that is just something, again, where you think, oh yeah, that deer counting solution could be used to go and count goats. So yeah, there's so many things, so many different uses. But again, if the drone's not the right use, then it's not going to be the best tool. But my point is, there's so many so many possibilities that there'll always be something of interest for you to work in. Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, 100%, Jamie. And I guess just to kind of follow up on that, Matteo, I don't know if you remember the conversation that we might have had when I met Matteo on a screening call, and I think something came up around, you know, if you have a skill or a qualification or an access to a market, that might be your sector, that if there's a problem to solve and the drone happens to be the tool, then you can talk their language. So that might be in the first instance, something to consider. But yeah, so many applications. We have some comments and questions. Pinky, I see your question. I'm going to come to that. I just want to read out what Frank Aspeling is saying, if I've pronounced that correctly, Frank. And that's, I think, to the question of, you know, what do you need to do to start a business? And he says, identify the 5 or 6 critical success factors that you need to put in place to reach your visual goal. Define your strategic plan or offering on the need. Critical success factors, and do a SWOT matrix on each analysis: people, financial, partnerships, brand, customer focus, mindset. 100%. Yeah, we should all be doing that regularly, right? For our businesses. Thank you so much, Frank, for adding that in. Appreciate it. So Pinky has a question. What can you say has been the biggest cause of failure in being an entrepreneur?
Oh, again, it depends on each specific, you know, case. But the biggest tend to be business viability, and that, you know, is a combination of the investment and not having enough money to you know, last on your runway, but also, you know, after, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, the majority of startups tend to drop off, and again, that's a combination of, you know, a lot of them get up and running and they go out and do things very well, but they find the kind of the scaling point in time, and then balancing all the needs of running the business, but then how to scale it as a sort of, you know, chicken and egg scenario almost. So that's a very difficult point in time. So yeah, I'd say the viability to kind of as the umbrella term, and again, that comes down to strategy. Sometimes it's market, factors outside of your control. I mean, COVID's obviously the most prominent, example recently, where so many businesses went under out through no fault of anyone. And that's because there's so many, intrinsically linked aspects of different sectors. But again, it's going back to the start and making sure that you do speak to experts, people that have done this, and you put in place as solid and robust a business plan as possible. Because if you can, contingency plan and, try and anticipate generic or even specifically identified potential, challenges that are coming up in the future, if you can mitigate those whenever they do arise, then you will be best placed to then come out the other side. If you don't, do that preparation before you start running your business, that's where people get caught out, where they're trying to still do the business and bring in money, but try and fight these other challenges that are attacking them from all angles. So yeah, that's as I say, business viability is kind of probably the biggest factor in why businesses fail. The great scenario, of course, is if you've got a very clear plan of exiting your business. So if you want to just set up the business, run it for a few years and then sell it on, that can be done much more effectively sometimes than not having a strategy of what your end game is. So if you actually are quite clear of, well, I want to set up the business, run it, sell it, try a different one, maybe learn from the first one, but do something different or better, leveraging my knowledge, my IP that I've built up in a different one, then again, have that in your business plan. You'll attract different investors that like that sort of strategy as well. And then again, when it comes to that point in time, you'll have a very clear plan and focus of, how to hit those KPIs and goals with a view to then exiting. So again, a lot of entrepreneurs who maybe don't want to stay necessarily say in drones, but want to go in different sectors, they might want to sell. And again, it's a great strategy if you just want to be a sort of serial entrepreneur and become an angel investor yourself as you build up, your kind of your cash from your sales over time. Some people like to just run their business and keep it as a sort of family run business or a privately run venture. But then again, the temptation from outside factors as you grow is that people will want to buy you because you're doing so well, or you might be in a particular geographical area or market that they want access to, and that's where you have to decide, what to do at that point in time. But again, yeah, lots to consider on the journey. It's a long road.
Jamie, we could sit and chat for hours, I'm sure. We have reached our time slot. Thank you so much. I don't see any more questions. For anyone who missed an opportunity to ask a question, please do still ask the question. We could always pass them on to Jamie. If any of you want to connect to Jamie, he is super friendly and super helpful and does some very cool stuff. So do follow him on LinkedIn. And Jamie, really good to see you, and hope to speak to you soon. Thank you so much for
likewise.
today.
Yeah, and thanks again for the audience participation. That's been great. And as Kim said, any questions, feel free to contact me. My email is up there. So no problem at all to have a chat, have a video call, and help you guys out as much as you need. Because again, we've all been through it ourselves, and we like to give back to make sure that the next generation are fully supported. And good luck, basically.
Thanks, Jamie. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. So I am now very happy to introduce our next speaker. She's our last speaker for the session today, Amy Benn from Innovate Durban. And Amy's going to be talking to us about design thinking principles. Over to you, Amy.
Thank you so much. Kim, I'm not sure if you can see me.
I did momentarily, and then we saw your background screen again.
Okay. Well, while I figure that out, let me share my screen. I do have a presentation today, so a little bit different from Jamie. But yeah, thank you so much, Kim. I will run through my presentation. If anybody does have questions, pop them into the Q&A. And then yeah, I probably won't be too long, and then I'll have time to answer questions at the end. But really, like we said previously, I am talking about the importance of design thinking for entrepreneurs. And so just while we have half an hour, this is what we're going to discuss. And importantly, I'm going to tell you why you should listen to me. So I'm going to talk about who I am, who Innovate Durban is, the value of entrepreneurs, what design thinking is, and then who we are creating businesses for, or who you as an entrepreneur are creating business for, and then why I really believe entrepreneurs need to be design thinkers. Yeah, so that's what we'll cover this afternoon. To start, well, before I start, I did just want to share this quote. It links a lot to kind of the belief of design thinking and I guess innovation and entrepreneurs. And that's really about the fact that it's not the strongest that survive, nor the most intelligent, but it's those of us who are most responsive to change. So I want to just start with that, and then hopefully for the rest of the afternoon, we can kind of imbibe that saying. So yeah, who am I? Who is Innovate Durban? So I've told you my name's Amy Benn. I am the Innovation Co-Lab Lead for Innovate Durban. I know that is quite a mouthful. Essentially what it means is I run our Innovation Center, which was based in Caterman, Durban. I say that because it was looted recently during the unrest that happened in KZN and Gauteng. But despite that, we are rebuilding, so we will have that up and running again, and we still have offices in the Point waterfront area. And Innovate Durban, although Durban is in the name there, I knew that was going to happen. I'm sorry, I'm at home at the moment, for those of you who've just realized, and my cat, who is afraid of everyone, wanted everyone to see him, so that was just his bum. So Innovate Durban is an innovation agency. We are a non-profit, and we support innovators and entrepreneurs in Durban in particular, absolutely, but in South Africa in general. In a host of different ways. I'm not going to go into that because that'll take a couple of hours, but there I have put our website, so it's just www.innovate.durban, and my email address. So after the session, if you've got any questions, if you are needing support for your business, you can absolutely have a chat to us, see what we do. Even if you are not based in Durban, we will see how we can help. And if we can't, we will link you to someone who can. So yeah, that's me and who I am, and hopefully why you should listen to me, whether you take everything I say or not. I should have also mentioned that I am a design thinking facilitator and our kind of in-house design thinking facilitator for Innovate Durban. And I believe so fundamentally in the power of design thinking to change the world, as ridiculous as that may sound. So before I talk about design thinking and kind of the fundamentals of design thinking, I did want to just chat about the value of entrepreneurs. I am not an entrepreneur. I do not have the stones to do that. I think being an entrepreneur takes a lot of courage and a lot of emotional bandwidth, and I am always so impressed by entrepreneurs. Just in general and in South Africa in particular. And so I just wanted to start with speaking into kind of those of you who are entrepreneurs and just reminding you of your value and why we need you. And the first thing might sound obvious, but entrepreneurs create businesses, which obviously a kind of full-time employee doesn't do. And it's not just about creating one business. Like Jamie said, you might be that entrepreneur that does just create a family business, and that's what they do, and it's their one business for life, and there's value in that. But very often we have entrepreneurs who are creating 3 or 4 different businesses, and the value that brings. And leading on from that, entrepreneurs and the businesses they create actively add to the national income, which particularly in a country like South Africa is so important to be kind of doing that. Entrepreneurs also enable social change. Any human has the ability to do that. Those of us who work full time can do that. Those of us, who aren't even working can do that. But entrepreneurs very often kind of, by the way that they are developing products and bringing new ideas to the market, are kind of key enablers of social change, which really is incredibly important as a society progresses and as we tackle issues that a society may have. Tied to that is also the fact that entrepreneurs develop communities. I have a background in community development. I've studied it. I have a master's in development studies, and I've kind of worked in some kind of community development work my whole working life. And we know South Africa is a poor country. Whether we want to try and pretend that we're developed or not, I don't think we are. There's a lot of good happening here, but there are a lot of communities that are kind of suffering and need a lot of support. And that's another beautiful thing that innovators do, innovators and entrepreneurs do. When you're based in your neighborhood or your town, you see an issue that people are facing, or a gap in the market, and you directly address that. And having entrepreneurs who do that well is so important in kind of just uplifting and developing communities that wouldn't necessarily have that support from government or big corporates or something like that. And then entrepreneurs also promote research and development. South Africa, when you look at our industry, we're not particularly around manufacturing and stuff. We're not really the base of any huge head offices. Yes, Durban, for example, has Toyota based here, but the head offices are elsewhere, and all the R&D is happening somewhere else, and we're kind of just putting the parts together. And so there's not a lot of funding from bigger corporates that goes into R&D in South Africa in particular. So very often entrepreneurs are responsible for a lot of kind of more community or lower level based R&D that happens in South Africa, but which is so important. And then obviously I had to bring this in as an employee of Innovate Durban, but entrepreneurs innovate. Like I said, I don't have the stones to be an entrepreneur because it is so difficult, and often a market can be so saturated. And so entrepreneurs need to, and often do, have this beautiful ability to just innovate and kind of just make that small change to what may be a very basic idea. And that just enables and promotes innovation. So yeah, before I wanted to continue on everything, I just wanted to reiterate the value of entrepreneurs and why we need you. And then hopefully you can listen to the rest of what I have to say around design thinking, and incorporate that, because unless we are good design thinkers, we aren't really going to be successful entrepreneurs. I know that might be a bold statement. And we need you to be successful entrepreneurs because of these 6 reasons. So then what is design thinking? My intro to design thinking workshop is normally 2.5 days long. I have got 30 minutes here, and I've used probably 8 of it to not talk about design thinking. So I'm also really happy to share a lot of resources. Like Jamie said, the drone industry is it might have been Kim who said it. The drone industry is very open and kind of accepting and stoked to help other people. The design thinking kind of industry, if you want to call it that, is just the same. There's so many resources available. So many different organizations who share what they do and their successes and their insights. So I've got a whole host of resources I could share if anybody is interested, because in half an hour I can't possibly dive as deep as I need to into design thinking to really help you understand, but I'm going to try my best in 3 slides. But really, what is design thinking? Design thinking is a mindset that helps you solve problems creatively. That is the most important thing I'm probably going to say today. It's not necessarily a system or a tool. Those things are incorporated into it, but it's about having a mindset. And if you're going to be good at design thinking or incorporating design thinking into what you do, you need to acknowledge that it requires a mindset shift that you may not have had previously. And really, it encourages organizations to focus on the people they're working for. And when that was kind of the first thing that Jamie said, I was upset because he'd stolen my thunder, but excited that obviously I had valuable things to say if he's also saying it. But really, it's about encouraging people to focus on the people we are creating services or products or businesses for. And ultimately, when we do that, it helps lead to better products, better services, and even better internal processes that we might have. Because of all of that, like Jamie said, when you're sitting down to create a solution for a business need or a gap in the market, your first question should always be, what's the human need behind that? It should never be, I've got a great product idea, let's do it. It should be, what is the need behind this? Am I creating something people actually want and will actually spend money on versus something I just think is a good idea? So design thinking is broken up into three kind of main pillars, or not necessarily broken up, but have three main founding pillars. And then there are 5 stages of design thinking. And my next slide will go into the stages. But really, design thinking, the kind of 3 main pillars are empathy, ideation, and experimentation. Like I said, if I'm doing an introduction to design thinking workshop, I'll spend 2.5 days leading each person through the 5 phases and all the associated tools that go with those phases. Obviously, we're not going to be able to do that, but design thinking doesn't always need to be the whole process or the whole kind of ticking each box for each stage, using all the tools. As long as you are using or acknowledging each of these pillars in your process, I think that can be kind of defined as design thinking and can be a design thinking process. So empathy is the foundation of design thinking. If what you are doing or the process you're undertaking doesn't involve empathy, you're not doing design thinking. You can't call it design thinking. Essentially that's the foundation. And then ideation is really the core of the creative activities in the design thinking process. Design thinking is fun. It's about not sitting in front of a computer and putting stuff into an Excel spreadsheet, as important as that is sometimes. It's about getting your hands dirty and discovering new things and just being creative and coming up with ridiculous ideas. And so there's a lot of creativity that goes into the design thinking process. That doesn't mean you need to be a creative person. You don't need to be able to, come up with wild stories, have incredible imaginations necessarily, be able to draw and paint and that kind of creativity. But it's just about kind of leaning away from kind of small, thinking or putting things in a box and being able to think outside of the box. And then a really important pillar or part of design thinking is experimentation. And again, Jamie alluded to this as well. He was talking about, before you're putting all your money and all your effort into an idea, developing an MVP. And so design thinking, considers very seriously experimentation and testing and prototype development as a way to test your assumptions, to make sure you understand what your potential customers think about your ideas and what you're doing. So it's really, like I said, about testing your ideas through prototyping. So those 3 pillars kind of support the 5 phases of design thinking. So those 5 phases, you can see them in front of you. This graphic, I keep using it and I keep saying this, it's not a great graphic because it puts them in kind of a linear path. And it's not always like that when we talk about design thinking. Yes, you are going to start with empathy, but you may not end with testing, and it shouldn't be, you know, I've done my five phases and I'm ticking each box, done. It may be that you reach, you know, the fourth kind of phase and you realize you've done something wrong along the way and you need to go back. But really the 5 phases are empathy, defining your problem statement, ideation, prototyping, and then testing. And so when we look at the empathy phase, like I said previously, that's really about understanding the person or the people that you are creating your solution for. It may sound dumb to say, but every product created, every solution developed is for someone who's got wants and needs and a family and complicated relationships and things they like and things they hate and colors they prefer. And if we don't understand the people that we are creating for well, we are going to create poorly, and we're going to potentially spend a lot of our time and a lot of effort creating a product that doesn't really appeal to a lot of people. Things that appeal to me may not appeal to you know, the person next to me. And so empathy is a really important part of design thinking. And there's a lot of ways to empathize. Sometimes, you know, people call it the understanding phase. And so to understand someone, you need to know them. You need to interact with them. You know, not theoretically, but one-on-one and kind of in person. So some of the tools that could be used here are things like surveys, like focus groups. You can go out and interview people. You can go out, you know, if you're creating a solution for, if I'm talking about the drone industry, and using something Jamie noted, you know, you're wanting to track game for sand parks, for example. You might just go and book yourself a weekend away at the Kruger National Park, not necessarily with any intention to do formal interviews or to survey, you know, people, but just watching and learning how do, you know, game rangers operate now, what does their job look like, and have kind of informal conversations with some of the game rangers. What are their struggles, you know, potentially keeping wild dogs alive, as a weird example. And so things like just inserting yourself into situations where you kind of have an idea your product would be used, is another way to just understand the people that you're creating for. Like I said, I could speak forever on each of these, but that's just kind of some examples around that particular phase. When we have worked in an industry for a very long time, we think we know the answer, or we think we know the problem more particularly. And because we think we know the problem, we can come up with the solution. What design thinking tells you to do is to not do that and not assume that. And so, you know, you might, being in the drone industry, for example, you might say, okay, this is the problem and these are my solutions, versus saying, you know what, I'm interested in drones. Let me go and understand who I'm creating for. And then you come to your define phase, which is you're defining the problem. So instead of saying, you know, the problem is needing to count deer in the Highlands of Scotland, rather first understand your problem and then understand who you're creating for, and then define your problem. It avoids a lot of assumptions you could make. And only once we have understood who we're creating for, we've defined what the actual problem is, beyond just assuming what the problem is, we then move on to the ideation phase. And that is about coming up with your ideas, with your solution. And this isn't about coming up with one great, you know, ticks all the boxes solution. It's about coming up with any possible solution to that problem. solutions that won't work, solutions that are too expensive, solutions that there's no invented technology for it yet. But it's about just coming up with awesome, wild, ridiculous ideas. And through that process, you start sparking other ideas. You start dreaming big, and it allows you to potentially discover ideas you wouldn't have discovered otherwise, particularly if you say, you know what, I know what the problem is, and this is my idea to solve it, rather than going through this whole process to potentially spark other ideas. Again, there are so many tools and ways to do this. I'm not going to go into all of them. And then the next two phases are really, like I said, just about testing that idea. And it's not about spending a lot of money. You can prototype using cardboard and plastic, or, you know, recycling you have at home, Play-Doh, you know, that your kid uses to mess your carpet up at home. And it's about prototyping and developing just a basic prototype so people can understand what you're talking about and can then interact with it. And often, you know, like I said, you might reach the prototyping phase or the testing phase and realize, you know, people hate this idea. Somewhere along the line, I've gone wrong. And you might have to go back. Maybe I defined my problem wrong or incorrectly. Or maybe I didn't truly empathize and understand who I was creating for. Or maybe, you know what, I picked this idea, but there were 5 other good ones. Maybe I should rather prototype that idea instead. And so, like I said, although this graphic is linear, often it's kind of a, you know, I've come all the way here, let me go back and start my process again. So really, those are the 5 phases of design thinking. I'm going to give you some examples, some good and some bad examples of design thinking in a bit. But I've said this, Jamie said this, but I want to reiterate it. The question should always be, who are we creating these businesses for? Do we even know who we're creating for? And are we developing products that we think have value? Or have we really done the work to find a true gap in the market? And are we working to fill that gap? Yeah, I really want to reiterate that. You know, working at Innovate Durban, I've seen so many people come up with what are seemingly great ideas, but they haven't done the work to find out whether this is something people, you know, are truly interested for, or you know, maybe it is something people are truly interested for, but I'm in Durban and the people who are truly interested in this are in Tokyo, for example, and I can't feasibly go there. So this is just such an important thing to consider as entrepreneurs and as innovators before we even start creating our businesses. So to talk about the bad examples first and then get onto the good examples, what happens when you don't use design thinking? There are definitely hundreds, thousands of great businesses that great great products, great service innovations that are out there that haven't used design thinking. I will definitely admit that. But I don't think there's a situation where using design thinking wouldn't have helped. So some things I just want us to think about that, particularly in the South African context, definitely don't use haven't used design thinking or didn't use design thinking. And if you ever do attend one of my introduction to design thinking workshops, you will get tired of how often I talk about pedestrian bridges, but it's a bit of an issue for me. But a lot of us, there's a lot of community centers. I'll start at the top of the list. There's a lot of community centers in South Africa that are underutilized, vacant, empty, you know, used once a week, once a month for a business forum meeting or something. Millions spent to, you know, building and developing these centers that could have so much use and value in them, and they lie empty. There are so many employment schemes that we've seen, you know, that government have implemented or nonprofits have implemented that, you know, do potentially have some benefit for a short amount of time or for a few, you know, a small number of people, but don't really always last in kind of, or end in long lasting employment. And then pedestrian bridges. I live in Durban, obviously, and I drive on the M13 very often. And there's probably, you know, just between Durban CBD, where the M13 starts, and Westville, which is 10 kilometers, there's probably 7 or 8 pedestrian bridges, and none of them get used. People will regularly run across the freeway, you know, endangering their lives, endangering the lives of people driving on the freeway. And I've seen so many accidents and just horrific things because people haven't used the pedestrian bridges, which seem like the best solution to get someone from one side of a very busy road to the road, but clearly isn't the best solution because it's not being used. And so the people who have designed these community centers, who've developed these employment schemes, who've built these pedestrian bridges, haven't been using design thinking. They don't truly understand the people that they are creating these centers for or building these bridges for. Yes, they see someone who needs to get from this side of the road to that side of the road, and because they're civil engineers, the obvious answer is a bridge, potentially a tunnel, but it's not the answer that's working for the people who are needing to use the bridge. And I don't know what the solution is, because I've never, although I complain about it a lot, and I worry for the people running across the freeway a lot, I haven't done the work. But if the people building those bridges truly understood the people and you know, what is their health like, what their day looks like, you know, all those kind of things, to understand them as a human being, they could get to understand why people aren't using these bridges and design a solution that still gets them from this side to that side, but a solution that actually gets used. So that's kind of what happens when we don't use, or what can happen when we don't use design thinking. And then I'm just cognizant of time, so I'm not going to talk about all of these examples, but you can definitely Google them. I'll talk about 2 or 3 of them. The first is Airbnb. We all know who Airbnb is, I assume. I assume most of us potentially have stayed in an Airbnb. Airbnb is the largest accommodation provider that does not own any actual real estate. And they're $1 billion company. And they obviously started, like a lot of you, I won't say us, did, small, struggling, trying to survive. And they were essentially about to declare bankruptcy. They were making, I think it was $200 or $400 a week. And they underwent a design thinking process that said, you know what, let's give this one last slug. Let's implement a design thinking process to kind of redesign how we're doing this and how we're presenting what we offer to people. And I won't go into all the details, but essentially the rest is history. And now they're $1 billion company. Another example is Clean Team. So Clean Team is a startup based in Ghana who provide sanitation services, toilets essentially, to people, but underwent a design thinking process and are having huge success with a very innovative and awesome product in Ghana through that design thinking process. And then another one that we can all relate to, I'm going to skip the middle two, sorry, but Uber Eats. I'll talk a bit about. Again, I assume a lot of us have potentially ordered something off Uber Eats. And Uber Eats constantly uses design thinking. You may not always pick it up. So often, you know, when we talk about design thinking, we think about the whole process and about using it, you know, at the start of a brand new product. But there's so many applications to use design thinking in tiny, small ways. And Uber Eats, you know, you may not have noticed the changes to your app, but there's constantly small changes that are happening to kind of improve the UX, the user experience of the app. And all of that is done through a design thinking process that Uber Eats undertakes on an ongoing basis. Again, this is 5 success stories I'm highlighting. There are so many success stories in huge ways and very small ways that design thinking has kind of enabled over the years. why do you need to be a design thinker? Like I said previously, there are so many entrepreneurs and innovative products and services that have found success without using design thinking, but I still think there's so much value in it, and so much benefit to entrepreneurs in general, but to entrepreneurs in South Africa in particular, and to South Africa in particular. So kind of 4 main reasons why I believe an entrepreneur needs to be a design thinker. And again, Jamie noted this as well, talking about the kind of very high failure rates of startups, and particularly kind of from the third year mark on. Design thinking and the way it's designed and its intentions is to reduce the rate of failure and to reduce the cost of failure. So not only is there a high failure rate for startups, but the cost of failure can be really high. And not just, okay, I failed, I don't have the money to continue with this business, but I failed and I've lost life savings that I risked and I put into this business, or I've lost other people's money, and that creates issues. And so design thinking, the process and kind of the fundamentals behind it are there to prevent you from failing ever, and also to, if you do fail, because that will happen, and that does happen, will also reduce that cost of failing, so that you're able to kind of get up and going that much quicker. And then in the South African context, design thinking is all about addressing people's particular needs, and finding success because you are addressing a real need. And we all know in the South African context, there are so many, base needs. Yes, everyone needs, every business is meeting some kind of need, but it might be a more superficial or superfluous need. In South Africa, we have poverty and hunger and unemployment. And there's so many opportunities for innovation and for entrepreneurs within that context to meet those needs, and to make money doing it. And so again, using design thinking enables entrepreneurs to identify those needs and then to be able to fill them. And then the last thing is around just finding your purpose. Obviously, as an entrepreneur, you are there to make money, and to build something. But it's also about finding your purpose. Maybe this is an opinion versus a truth, but I don't think if you're being an entrepreneur to make money, that's going to last you through all the ups and downs and the struggles and the difficulty of being an entrepreneur. If you're becoming an entrepreneur because you want to create change and you're wanting to kind of really address the needs and the issues in society or in the area you're creating, using design thinking is just such a good way to be able to do that. So that is the end of my presentation. Again, there is the email address for the Innovation Campus, as well as my email address if you do have any questions that we don't get to now. I'm going to stop sharing my presentation. I hope I didn't rush through that too much. Like I said, I would normally use 2.5 days to do that. I've done it, I think, in half an hour. So thank you so much for at least listening to me. Whether you take it to heart or not, that's up to you.
Amy, thank you so much. That really was a whistle-stop tour of design thinking, but you set it out so nicely, and it was extremely clear. So I think people will definitely have takeaways. So we do have some questions coming through. I had some questions prepared for you as well, but let's go to the first one. Melanie says, hi, Amy, wonderful presentation. I was wondering what your view is on corporate entrepreneurship, meaning that an individual is in an organizational setting that uses design thinking and innovates an idea to solve a conundrum that results in a new business unit for that organization that is not part of that organization's core business. Okay, that's a mouthful. It is in the Q&A. If you want me to read it again, I can. Otherwise, you can read it. Are you good?
I've got it open in front of me. I started panicking, so yeah, I've got it open. And I'm a very opinionated person, so I'm going to try and do this without stepping on any toes. I think that innovating in a corporate, you need to be very aware of where you stand in that corporate, and where that corporate stands around your contribution. I think if you are working for a company and you really believe in what they're doing and you're really excited about what they're doing, and maybe you're given that project to undergo a design thinking process, there's value in that 100%. And we need, this is one thing, design thinking is not just for innovators and for entrepreneurs, and that's really actually not where it started even. So there's a lot of examples of design thinking being used in a corporate setting to do exactly what Melanie has alluded to. There's things to weigh up about whether there's value in doing that outside of a business or within a business setting, and making sure where, like I said, where you stand with the business and whether that is something that they want to do or not. And then obviously, I mean, with generally any organization, you kind of sign to say, I'm not going to compete. So it may be that you want to explore this outside of the business, but you're not able to because you've said you won't compete with them. For me, like I said, I'm not an entrepreneur and I'm bad, and I don't want to create money. I want to create change. I'm not saying creating money is not valuable and important. And so for me, it would always be, I'm going to do this inside the business because there's a lot more support structures to do it as well, than going outside and trying to do it myself. I'm waffling. I don't know if I've answered your question, Melanie. Let me know if I have.
That was a good attempt at answering that. Yeah, that's a conundrum, right? And if any of us who have worked in large corporate, we would know that that's a challenge. So good question. And much more debate available on that, I'm sure. Matteo, great interaction today. I love that. Okay, so Matteo has, first, I think of myself as being more logical than creative. How can someone with a logical mindset incorporate design thinking in their process?
It is a good question. You definitely can. The beauty of design thinking really is that each of those 5 phases kind of uses both, well, not both, either kind of a logic approach or creative approach. So although empathy, does make you think more emotions and kind of in touch with yourself and all of that, really fundamentally, it's about being able to set out your questions in a logical manner to get as much information as possible that you need to kind of understand fully. The defining phase takes so much logic. That is years of design thinking, and I will admit I suck at that phase. I hate it because it does take a lot of kind of logic and synthesizing what you've understood, looking at your data and coming up with your kind of one thing. It's under the ideation phase that creativity comes in. And when I do my design thinking intro workshop, we play a lot of just essentially dumb games around ideation, because humans are, even if we are creative, we're not wired to ideation. And so for me, if you're wanting to, not being creative doesn't mean you can't incorporate design thinking into your process, but you may start, finding issues around the ideation phase if you're not too creative. And that's about practicing ideation, as weird as that sounds. So my best thing is to take an empty glass. This one's a little bit full, but an empty glass, a notebook and a pen, and time yourself. Give yourself a minute and come up with as many different, uses for that glass as possible. And it just teaches you to ideate. It's a dumb thing. You can pick anything you want, a picture frame, a plant. How many ideas in 60 seconds can you come up for that device? And it's just about teaching your brain to think in a different way. So that's one thing I would recommend. But yeah, there's a lot of resources that will help you as well, which I'm happy to share.
And on that point, Amy, Matea also asked, what books would you recommend? You just said resources. So what
Yes.
books would you recommend to beginners to learn design thinking?
Cool. Again, I don't want to talk about all of them because so many, but the kind of the first thing I would recommend reading, and I can share it with everyone. I've got it on PDF, legally on PDF. It's called A Field Guide to Human-Centered Design. So often design thinking can be called human-centered design. And that was developed by an organization called IDEO, which are our lead design thinking organization.
Great. So there is another question in the chat, but I thought I would ask you this because I'm sure people are thinking this. So initially, you kind of think that the design thinking is for the beginning of your business, right? To get going and to know how you need to go about things. You also mentioned a really good example, Amy, of Uber Eats that continue doing this. So would you recommend kind of simple ways of using design thinking in your everyday going about your business to make your business effective, but kind of on, while you're working at it? What could you recommend?
Yeah, I think obviously it depends a bit on who you are as a human being, what your business is and what you're doing. But for me, I showed you those 5 phases and I spoke about the 3 pillars. And it's about potentially just looking at those and some of the tools in more detail and pulling out the things that work for you and for your product or your business. But the 2 things I would recommend potentially for everyone is really just that kind of base understanding of not assuming, challenging your assumptions. So even if you've got your potentially your designated space that you work at every day, or on your laptop, to put a little post-it note and just say, is this assumption correct? It seems like such a small thing, but so often we get so bogged down in what we're doing and ticking each stage of what we're doing, that by the time we've done the 5th thing on our to-do list, it's worked on a whole bunch of different assumptions that we've made. And so just like I said right in the beginning, design thinking is that mindset. So it's just about challenging that mindset. And then the other thing is and again, talking about Matea's question around ideation and how you do that as a non-creative person, buy yourself some post-it notes and a Koki, and have that with you wherever you go. I don't travel without my post-it notes, so that when you are presented with a question, a query, or something sparks, you've got. This is a terrible thing to say, but design thinking creates so much waste in a negative way in terms of how many post-it notes we go through. I think hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. But there's value in writing things down and seeing it in front of you. And so yes, ideation is a huge part of design thinking, but in small ways we can kind of bring in that ideation into just responding to a potential investor's email, as weird as it is, rather than getting stuck into replying. Think about it, ideate about it a bit before we kind of follow that process through.
That's great, Amy. So in true bootcamp style, because that's what we've done here this afternoon, we have one more question and then we have to wrap up because we promised a 3 o'clock hard stop. So one more question and a very brief answer. So Duane Kellerman said, hi, Amy, awesome presentation with 3 exclamation marks. I love the 3 pillars you mentioned. How does someone who struggles with empathy get into the process of design thinking? Oh, we've got the opposite question now. Seeing as though it's the foundation leg of the stool that is design thinking. Okay, can you do this in like 30 seconds?
I can try. Think about how complicated you are as a human being, how many needs and wants and desires and opinions you have about things, and just put those onto other people, not necessarily the nitty-gritty, but think about the person that you are designing for, and that they woke up angry because their coffee was cold, and just the small little things that make a human who they are, and then work that back to saying, how do I understand this person fully? Even if you just start with asking a question, what's your favorite color? You've got an opinion on that. They'll have an opinion on that. Maybe it'll spark something more.
Brilliant. Well done. This was an absolute pleasure, Amy. I feel like we could do this more often. And please, for anyone who's on here, do connect with Amy. How does one go about getting on this workshop? Is that a thing that's open to anyone?
Yeah, we run in person for those in Durban. We run virtual ones as well. So 100% if you are keen. A lot of them, the longer ones are paid, but every now and again we do shorter free ones as well. There's also some content on our website around the design thinking and ones we've done in the past. So you're welcome to have a look at the website, but also send me an email. It's Amy, amy@innovate.durban, and we can connect.
Brilliant. What a way to end off a brilliant workshop with such energy and color behind you and such passion for what you do. Thank you so, so much, Amy. Well done to all the questions and the interaction. That was really good. And that's what a boot camp is meant to be. I believe there is going to be a post of the recordings. Melanie just asked about that. So there is going to be a poll that gets put up before we end the session. I'm now going to wrap up this. Oh, there you go, just on cue. Do complete the poll. So we've come to the end of the session. Thank you so, so much for attending. Some of you attended both sessions, which is great. You know, I always say, if you can take one thing away from a session like this and implement it, share it, think about it, then you've won. So I myself have taken some things away, so I'm sure all of you have. Please reach out to the speakers, connect on LinkedIn, etc. So Drone Tech Innovation Challenge is up next, which is going to lead up to the Innovation Day on the 1st of October. So please follow the Saldanha Bay Industrial Development Zone on LinkedIn for more information. Well done to the organizers, Palisha and Nakwanda, brilliant graphics and creatives and the PR that has gone along with that. And I'm really hoping that there have been some, light bulbs and aha moments for a lot of our young entrepreneurs and even people that are just looking into this. So thank you. Have a brilliant afternoon. Stay safe and see you at the Innovation Challenge. Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.
Cheers, everyone. Thanks, Kim. Thanks, guys.